Kari asks, how do you feel transgender people focus on passing versus leveling social injustices? How is your perspective as a person of color?
Ooh, oh, that's a rough one. Oh my goodness. I do feel like there is again, I'm deep in the community, but I just feel like there is an overabundance of people who are so focused on passing um and not so I understand from a perspective of safety, like, like if I look this way, I would be less likely to be harassed or looked at or harmed. Like that I get, but that's not where it's coming from. There's a lot of like this idea of passing the community as far as like you're deserving of poor treatment until you look a certain way. And I'm like, oh no, like that's not okay. So I get really nervous about that. And also to the point of this question, like, yeah, a lot of people are more concerned about how they're being perceived and what they have access to instead of viewing themselves as part of a larger community and as far as like this is wrong and we need to stand together. And there's not a lot of that stand together part. A lot of it is just, but me, I've been mistreated, I've been maligned, look at me. And it's just like, I see you, and I'm going to do something about it. And I hope that when you're in a better place, when you're in a safer place, that you're going to stand with us. And a lot of times I found that people run in, see that, oh, what a beautiful harvest, I would love some. Like, yeah, if you're hungry you can have some, and they snatch it all up. And then they just say, look at what I have, an abundance of this, I'm so fed. And then we're over here starving even though we were the ones that planted the seeds. So there's not a lot of balance there. I say that I recognize it, and that's why I do try to emphasize, especially in my work with youth, how can we help each other, how do we stick up for each other, how do we understand each other better, versus just on a very individualized setting as far as like, what do you need personally, and then it only affects and benefits you.
Let's get back into some of the things we were talking about before that you said you had a lot more to talk about. Um, how do race, gender diversity, and neurodiversity intersect for you in your life?
Thank you. Yes, I did want to mention this, and I appreciate you bringing it back up because I completely forgot to. Um, yeah, one of the things, and this was back, you asked the question a while back around coming out, and one of the things that made coming out really difficult was that um, for a longest time, again, when I was flying under the radar and like just trying not to be like acknowledged and perceived, even though again, the goal was to not be perceived, people would go out of their way to tell me like how, I was unfeminine, and how, I would never, I'd never be perceived as like womanly or ladylike, because of like my facial features, like, your lips are too big, your nose is too wide, your hair texture is, it's not a good quality of curl, like just constantly undermined as far as like, one, who the fuck asked you? And two, just it was just nonstop. So it was really difficult. And that before I came out to people, they constantly told me like, you don't fit in this perception of what I think a woman looks like. And when I responded, well, actually, I'm non-binary. I'm not a woman to begin with. People, oh no, but you're so feminine. You're just so sweet. Look, you're so much roundness. You have curves. You can't be androgynous when you have curves. Look at that butt. So I'm just like, it was very infuriating that, when I would tell people who I was, they would go out of their way to try to undermine me or try to tell me I wasn't. Um, and that goes a variety of ways. In one instance, what is the word? You respond to people whenever someone says this is who I am, you respond and you use the same words, the same language that they use to describe themselves. This is a very basic level of how you don't do that. I was doing a presentation and I referred to myself as a black person, a black American, whatever, and this person got up and said, actually, you're African American. And I'm just like, oh no, like, so like don't do that. And I will say, as far as it happens to me, as far as my race, as far as my gender, as far as like even just my neurodiversity, when I share with someone, that I am neurodivergent, their response is like, oh no, you can't be neurodivergent because you're not awkward in the way that I expect you to be awkward. I'm like, I come again. um And even too regarding my sexuality, if I share, like, oh, I'm asexual, people are like, oh no, you can't be asexual, look at your lips, look at your butt, like, like I think you just, and all the other horrible ace myths and things that people aim to try to fix people or otherwise change who people are, who I am, becomes very scary. And I will say some of that has gone way beyond like suggestions and has gone towards more of a violent direction too. So being very mindful of that, a lot of my experiences are specifically intertwined with each other. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, this is misogynoir, like this is something where people, this is sexism specifically against Black people of marginalized genders, or this is, I don't know, uh, ableism. Like there are just a lot of different ways and spaces that people continually try to project themselves and their perceptions of who I should be onto
Mm.
me, and are very angry, not just disappointed, angry that I'm not the person that they wanted me to be, and I find that very weird and also very scary at times.
Do you find that, that an assumption I would have would that be predominantly when you're dating or in an intimate relationship with somebody? But is that something that you find, that kind of anger that you're not fitting into the box, in other situations, just in standard, in typical society?
Um, it shows up in a lot of ways. Not so much like actively dating, but definitely in how people perceive me walking down the street. If someone, I don't know, like cat calls me, or and I respond, and they're just like, uh, you know, they're like, like, hey lady, how's it going tonight, or something, like, I'm not a lady. Then they get mad 'cause they're like, are you implying I'm gay? Like I have to fight you or otherwise, be violent towards you because now you've made it seem like I'm gay in front of my friends or my people who, I was harassing other street people with. So there's that perception there. Trying to think. As far as like how violent it gets, it's usually that like other people are projecting onto me in a romantic or sexual frame, and then are very angry when I don't fit that particular bubble. But I don't know. I think even just my interactions with other people that aren't romantic or sexual, there's just this idea that okay, because you're here, you must have access to these certain areas. Um, like I don't know, I am big on dancing, but a lot of times people make the assumption that like, "Oh, you must be a good dancer." And I'm like, "Why would you say that?" Things like that. There's something else too that stuck out to me, but that's okay. It's leaving my mind. Oh, that I have a very supportive family. Like they're like, "Oh, well, you're an adult and you're queer and you're trans and you do a lot of work serving the community. So obviously you have like P flag parents." And I'm like, "No, like that is not the case at all." So not even just outside of the community, but even inside the community, having to constantly go against a lot of these stereotypes and things that are projected onto me.
Mhm. And what do you do in those cases? Is the way that we sort of fix that and get people away from those assumptions?
Oh, I like cussing people out, but that's as far as
Nice.
like helpful.
One of the things that you said when we were talking in the break there was that the there's the stereotypes that people like to hold others to, and from your experience, what you've seen is that the stereotypes around the Black community, and even within, people like to hold you more strongly to that. Can you speak a little bit more to that? The stereotypes are not only there, but they're like stronger, of like, oh well, you have to be that. Or am I misinterpreting what you had said during the break?
I, they're just like a lot of ways and spaces that like it shows up that it's hard to like isolate. So I guess I'll just start even by going like when I think about safety even and in communities, a lot of times people generally view like LGBTQ communities as like one place, one oasis of space, which we all know that that is not true. But the other thing for me is I constantly have to figure out not only like is this space, queer friendly, is it trans friendly, is it friendly to Black people, like can I go here? And that's been actually one of the biggest barriers, just even trying to go out and find people and meet new people. Um, it's not just like, oh, hey, I see you're trans, me too. But it also like, oh no, have you unpacked any of your anti-blackness? Like, or are you just gonna be awful to me? So that's been a thing. Um, oh, sorry, this is not specific like in the community, but it happened at a in a conference setting. I was sitting at I think it was a Philly trans conference, and Philly trans conference is cool, no shade to that. But as I was listening to this surgeon talk about bottom surgery, so I was just, really attentive and listening. And I did raise my hand to ask a question. And the surgeon, he's just like, oh, he was like, I can't guarantee that you're going to be more than 8 inches. I know how, everyone asked me for that. I'm like, I was just so like shocked. And I'm just like, the idea that he just assumed like, oh, you're black, so you're expecting to have a very large, phallus due to bottom surgery. And I'm just like, that was not my question at all. But also very worrisome in that not only is it the community members that you have to vet and the strangers you have to vet, but also even potentially, practitioners and medical folks who are supposed to be helpful. Um, so yeah.
Wow, that's very disappointing. And I guess these days, in a kind of a politically correct atmosphere, I'm assuming that there's a fair bit of not necessarily racism or applying stereotypes to you, but that fear of like, oh, is my privilege going to show? Am I going to say something stupid around you? And so I best just not say anything.
I see that too, and it just comes off as avoidance. Like it's
Mm.
I'd rather people be clumsy and want to connect than to just be entirely avoidant, for fear that they're going to say the wrong thing. Um, because and what I will say, and even you don't get to know until you get to know me, but I generally do like to call people in. I like to let them know like this is how you love me properly. Like let me show you. Versus if I don't care for you at all, I don't spend any of my time or energy on you. So like for someone to actually say like, hey, like you don't want to go around saying this, or I'd be careful. That's someone saying, I love you, I care about you. So I'd say I'd lean on more on the side of like getting comfortable with potentially, being uncomfortable or saying the wrong thing and putting your foot in your mouth. It's going to happen. But stick with it instead of just being completely avoidant. That's not helping you, and it's not helping other people get connected to you. I will say too, though, that is another thing even when I'm looking at community and like potential like new friends, the first thing I do look at, whether it's someone's Facebook or their dating profile or their Instagram, how many pictures do you have with other people of color? Particularly people who are self-proclaimed allies, and it's like, oh, are you married? Are you partnered? And it's like, let me see what your wedding looked like. And then when I see it's just like a sea of white people, I'm like, huh, interesting. Like, the people who are closest to you look like this, but what you're telling me is that like, oh, I'm a very cool and friendly person to be around. So, um, again, that's not usually something I would say out loud to someone, but it's something I do notice and I do look for. Similarly with leadership, if you're saying, oh, we're an LGBTQ organization and we serve all people, I'm like, where your trans people at? Where your black people at? Like I want to know, why aren't your materials also in Spanish? Like just very basic for me. But I think instead of people being instead of people thinking about who's missing, like who isn't feeling invited, who isn't feeling welcome, they get more into this idea of like, oh no, I might be called out, or people might perceive me badly. And it's like, if you're not doing the work, you should be perceived badly.
Mhm. Well, I know for us personally, like it's been a struggle. I know I feel called out in not a bad way, just like in a neutral way for that. Yeah, we've been trying to create an organization that is accepting and welcoming to all, but there is that sort of level of an extra step that you have to take to get to do that. I feel like I've kind of I haven't I just haven't had enough people in my life that weren't white, you know, um, in in the circles and just the areas that I've been in, and it's you saying about the wedding, and I'm like thinking about my wedding and going, yeah, damn it, it was mostly, if not all white, wasn't it? It's like crap. It's like, ah. And then I'm trying to do the Rolodex thing of like, no, but I have black friends. And it's just like, That's kind of that's it doesn't sound right either. Um,
Right, right. Yeah. And it takes time too. Like I'm not, there are a lot of ways and spaces where I'm like, there are people who are not currently in my life, and I know my life would be more immensely enriched if I do something differently. So again, I'm not coming from a place like I'm doing it right, but just the idea of like, why am I not closer to, populations from this group or people, who have these experiences? Is there something that I'm doing that's coming off as classist, as elitist, as, like what is it that I am doing that I can control?
mhm.
Because certain things we can't. Like I grew up in a very I went to high school in a very, very white area. So like I wouldn't expect most people in that area to have a lot of friends of color. But if you've moved away from that area, if you've, gone to school or otherwise had the opportunity to explore and be different places, my standards start to like creep up as far as like, why is this not happening?
Mhm.
Um, and two, also a little bit of forgiveness in that, like, at what point in your life were you actually able to be safe too? Because
Yeah.
you can't also try to like, explore and, explore with other, not even with other people, but explore other communities if you're not even safe to be yourself and show up for yourself as well as possible too.
Yeah.
So there's some balance there.
Let's move on to neurodiversity and cover that a little bit before we move on to the TransPride Pittsburgh stuff. You mentioned a couple of things for neurodivergence that really stuck out to me. How does neurodivergence show up in your identity, and how does it affect your journey?
Um, ooh, well, obviously the forgetfulness and constantly forgetting my topics, that's one thing that's showing up here. But I will say, and this is more specific to intrusive thoughts and OCD, like just having like recurring unhelpful thoughts that are very disruptive to my everyday life. Like most people do have uncomfortable thoughts or thoughts that aren't useful, but like to the point where I physically cannot move or feel like I can't breathe. That's it's been a little bit debilitating. Um, I will say too, it's weird, just kind of thinking about like the concept of normal and also like what normal would be. I think often that my brain has a very reasonable reaction to the world that I'm currently in, So in a world that is full of, ableism and racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and just generally seeped in like cisgender hetero patriarchy, is my brain responding appropriately to, what's going on? Probably. So I don't know. Like, would I be neurodivergent and in another like place, like a society that was warm and welcoming and everyone had housing and food? Like, probably not, but I don't know.
Mhm.
So it gets weird there. And even just um even knowing too, like we don't fully know the depth of the harm that people are kind of like walking through and existing through, like just even like the levels of trauma that people have encountered. And I'm talking specifically about black people, but especially black trans people. And to constantly see, people on TV who, who look like you, who are on TV because they've been murdered or because they, been put in the jail cell of the wrong gender or other horrible things, just constantly on your psyche, and knowing that you are very much visible and very much unprotected is scary and also not helpful in the grand scheme of things. But then also in the same vein, knowing that, because of, what I look like and because of who I am, I'm uh I'm at risk for higher levels of violence. And I know this and I try to do things to keep myself safe. But then people who may share one or some of the identities that I have, they kind of take my experiences or experiences from people who are like me, and they project it's like, I'm so harmed. It's so risky just being here. And it's just like, it's not risky being you. It's not risky, having money and having access in the way that you're flaunting it, and you're not doing anything to help other people who don't have that type of access. So it just feels very, I don't know, annoying and suspicious. That Not that I'm neurodivergent, but just that like I can't even just like have that and it be understood. Because most people you would think like, oh, like a gratuitous amount of trauma, like that makes sense versus, but why? And some of that is still rooted in the stereotype that, Black people are stronger than other groups of people, like physically stronger, mentally stronger. You can just abuse and cause Black people to suffer and they just bounce right back. And instead of saying, why the fuck are you doing that? Why are you treating people like this? They're just like, resilience.
Yeah, it almost sort of gets self-inflicted then, right? That yeah, that you have to be resilient because we're Black and we're supposed to be, and that's the presentation we have to give to the world, is that we're tough and it doesn't affect us. You said something that I really that really touched me, and it was along the lines of what you were just talking about there for a second, but the way you had phrased it when we were on our break really hit me hard, and that was the accepting of mistreatment, accepting that as normal and okay. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Ooh, that one's rough for me personally. Well, personally for a variety of reasons, but one of the main reasons actually is because I'm the eldest child. So I was not actual child. I was the emotional support person to my parent to help raise my younger siblings and to be responsible for everything. So this idea that anything that could potentially go wrong is your fault because of your birth order. And also too, on top of that, with the racism, as far as like you need to work twice as hard to get to get half the recognition, and you're constantly going to be paid less and treated horribly, and you should expect suffering. So it's hard to speak up because, like, do you want to be a complainer? Because you have two stereotypes to fall into. You be, the what is it, the intimidating, scary Black person, or you can be the lazy Black person. Like, it's just you can't win.
Mm.
And also too, I'm so furious, the number of people, it's not even something that's new or unknown, but the number of people who have been writing and saying for years and years, this is not sustainable. We are hurting. We are, please help. It's like we read about it and like, oh, it's so historical. Like, how many people run around quoting Audre Lorde about self-care, as an act of self-preservation, but you don't give a damn about Black women, Black lesbians. So it's just very interesting that, people like to take the words and the experiences, but don't actually want to hear when people are hurting and when people are saying, I need help. I am not, I'm not bulletproof. I am vulnerable. I am soft. And that's not a failing. That is just how it is. And I don't think Black people don't get the privilege of being seen as soft or vulnerable or fallible. It doesn't. And especially if you're trans too, on top of that, like, no, then now you're expected to just be some like superhuman human being, and that's not how it works.
Let's move on to TransPride Pittsburgh.
Yee.
You are part of the organization that we're partnering with, and we are going to be helping do a few things with the health and wellness conference you have coming up in October. So first off, how did you get involved with TransPride Pittsburgh?
Um I gotten directly involved in 2016, that I knew of. I actually Trans Pride, the conference, it spun out actually of a more organic kind of community run thing that was based actually in drag. So the drag troupe that I was a part of years before, maybe like 2010, that made me feel welcome and comfortable. That was an offshoot of what now is the Trans Pride Conference. So I've known about it for a minute, but it's just this idea that came up really organically, and over years and years, it's grown a lot. So it has multiple tracks now, whereas before it was an all community conference, and it was literally just trans people helping other trans people. Like, here's what you need to know. If you need help with writing a letter, or here's a skill that I know and I want to share. So it was really cool, and there's still a huge aspect of that because there's a community portion of the program. But now the conference does have a very heavy medical and behavioral health focus too, so we can help professionals do their jobs better of serving transgender people. So it's really exciting in that we have attracted a lot more medical doctors, surgeons, people who are concerned about preserving fertility, people who want to eliminate barriers to accessing medical care. There's just so much, and also a lot of social workers too, a lot of educators. What do I need to know about serving trans students in my classroom? Making my class and my school a safer place to be. It's just really neat and how it's grown and all of the things that we're able to tackle and share. I will say for the past couple of years, I've been a director with TransPride since 2016, but for the past couple of years for the conference, I've usually done a presentation on my work serving LGBTQ young people, and also particularly like serving Black trans youth and what that looks like, things to consider. And I also generally host the Top Surgery Show and Tell portion, which is really exciting for me, because it was actually at another conference where I got to see Top Surgery Show and Tell, and that really helped me to understand, like what my expectations were, who I should be reaching out to, and just being able to talk to other people as far as like what was the process like, what was daunting, what was easy, who helped you, and to have that pleasure and privilege again to be able to support other people as far as what their considerations are, what they're looking to receive, and also to file a revision or a grievance if they don't have the outcome that they are looking for. So it's just a really beautiful conference to be able to have that support and to be so community focused and based. And also, again, I do like a little bit of finger wagging at the professionals. Like, yeah, this pronoun 101 is not cutting it. Here's what you need to do to actually serve all of your communities.
Very interesting. How much of the conference now would you say is something that is accessible in a way where like the community can, obviously the community can attend all of the sessions and everything that goes on, but like what percentage of the conference as a whole would actually appeal to trans people versus being strictly academic?
I'd still say the majority of the conference, like 80% of the conference, even if it's not directly helpful to you, it is just very useful as far as like, oh, I don't know what the requirements are for letters, and you can go and like, here's a letter writing workshop, or I wonder how kids are doing in this particular area or these communities. It's still really fascinating. So even if it doesn't directly apply, like if it's not a program or an activity that you can participate in, it's still really good knowledge to have and to know what is going on, what has been successful. I do tend to sit in on most all of the conference just because it is very enlightening to figure out like what is happening, what has been useful to people. And still, again, we are very trans focused. So most of the people presenting are trans. So like other people are allowed to participate to receive the knowledge, but we do want to highlight especially all of the awesome members of our community and their skill sets and what they're able to do. Some of the really cool other workshops that I've seen in the past have been like self-defense classes, have been art focused or writing focused, and it's just really neat that it can tap into so many aspects of things that we enjoy and really believe in. Oh, film too, that was a good one. Sorry. So yeah, most of the conference, I'd say probably about 80% of the conference. There are some that are just so specific that like maybe that's not your particular, like, I don't know, like potential like bottom surgery tracks or something. Is that someone's like, that's not on my radar for now. But again, I still feel like it's good knowledge to have. Like if someone's like, oh, I'm getting a phalloplasty, you shouldn't be looking at them like, what? Explain that. You should come to the conference and just know.
What are some of the things that you're specifically excited about for this year's conference?
Um, I I'm excited for Top Surgery Show and Tell because that's again my favorite part. Like, it shouldn't be my favorite. I can't. Who can stop me from having a favorite? That's
Right?
definitely one of my favorite ones, though. And I'm going to have a youth panel for young people to tell us, what has been helpful in the community, mental health wise, like not beyond, but in addition to something like therapy or intensive outpatient programs, what community wise has been really supportive and helpful to our young people, because that's really where I want to lean into, and I want to hear directly from young people. No shade to the professionals and the older people present, but I'm old by young people's perception. So I want to know like what's going on, what are we getting right, what are we what can we improve on.
That's very exciting. Is there anything else about the conference specifically that you want to bring up or mention?
Mm, just the dates again, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that's important. It goes all day. Ooh, I don't I don't know how well they'll be advertised because it might just be a very local thing. But I also tend to do also host affinity groups. So if somebody wants to watch a particular track or be present physically in person together, I usually do host those types of watches too. So that's just something that I do personally. But I feel like overall conferences are great, and again, no shade to my conference or anyone else's, but my favorite part of most any conference is getting to know the people who are attending, like, because usually I meet such really cool people and a few lifelong friends, just networking and, not even so much in the professional sense with business cards and all that, but really just meeting people and hearing their story and why they showed up and what they're hoping to get out of this resource. So
Mhm.
that's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's why Justice Renee is really excited about the transverse being an active part, and she wants to focus really on the beer track, which is what she calls that sort of the the in between, grab a drink, kind of sit down and chat with just the random people that are there about what they've experienced there at the conference, and just get to know them, all of those things. So we're looking forward to trying some of that out this year, and then definitely focusing on that once we get to be able to do these in person again.
Hmm. And even I want to make sure too that the attendees of the TransPride Pittsburgh conference know about the transverse and can participate more fully too, because this is much more like all year round instead of like, okay, conference is great and there's a lot of like work and pain put into like one weekend, but the transverse is always. So knowing
Mhm.
that too and being able to share that resource, I'm so excited.
Well, I'm really excited about learning the things that we do from the conference and being able to apply all those things that are talked about and are learned there to our practice and to the areas that we focus on for what the community needs. It can be really hard. We come from our area of experience and our level of privilege, and it can be really hard to kind of get out of that to think of what other people might need. So being able to be there on the ground and hear all of that is going to be great. I really look forward to that. And yeah, like I said, I been very excited about the idea of doing or taking part in a trans conference. So I'm very excited for our involvement there.
Yes, it's needed.
Um, I don't know that I really had anything else. If nobody else has any questions, I think we can probably wrap it up and let you get back to your night. It's getting late over there.
Yeah, it's getting late.
Um, let's talk a little bit though. We didn't talk about the work you do on a daily basis. You've been talking about working with trans youth. What are some of the things that you focus on in your quote unquote day job that you'd like to share with us?
All right. So for my day job, I work at the Humane Wellness Foundation in Pittsburgh. We serve all of Western PA though, and we get to serve the whole like age range of people in the community. So I think that currently the youngest people I work with are 6, and the I don't know how old the oldest people I work with are because it's rude to ask the seniors how old they are. But we have senior groups, we have youth groups, we have some are just general based on age, and some are very specific to life experiences. So we do have the great privilege of having support for our gender diverse young people. So people who are questioning, who are trans, who are non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid. It's really exciting that we're able to pair our littles with bigs. Our littles tend to range from 12 to 18 years old, and our bigs are usually 21 and older, and have been vetted, not just like random people who show up. But we're able to offer that level of mentorship in group settings, and we're also able to do it individually. One thing I'm really pleased about is that we're able to get gender affirming materials to young people for free. Like there's no cost. If a young person says, Coley, I need a binder, literally in this space right now, I can measure you for a binder and get you one. Like I have them in on hand from extra small to 5X. If you need a gaff, I can order those. Any pretty much anything, as long as you told me like, Coley, this is going to help me feel more comfortable in my gender expression, like we're going to make it happen. So that's really exciting there. All of our youth programs are at no cost to the young people participating. So that even includes our cognitive behavioral therapy based support groups for young people. We do teen mental health first aid training for young people who want to be part of our youth advisory board, and they get to determine what programming that we don't do. I also have clinicians that can go into the homes of young people at their request. So if a young person says, like I have a family member or a parent who's really struggling and I wish another adult could talk to them, we can do that and they can have that service for up to 18 months. We have the ability to go into schools and do trainings for schools. We train human service professionals, so like CYF and other nonprofit organizations. We we do a lot, and we do have a general center of excellence. So we do trainings too. That even if you're not human service focused, you have trans employees, you have trans clients, and we want to make sure that um, your policies and your procedures and even your hiring is on par to be as welcoming as potentially possible. And we also have legal aid. I forgot about that. We have a pantry that people can come and shop at and get dry goods, fresh fruit, frozen goods, meats, full size hygiene products, laundry soap, safer sex kits, period products. So it's really cool in that we're able to do a lot and we're still growing rapidly. So I'm just really glad to be in a position of leadership for a queer and trans serving organization, because I've been at other organizations that have not been friendly, even though I've worked at previous LGBTQ organizations. So I'm
Hmm.
not going to name names, but yeah.
Well, that's amazing, and that sounds very similar to what all the things that I want to do for the transverse. Like there's a lot of alignment there, and I just hope that we're able to get there soon because I feel like we've got the welcoming organization. We need to work a little bit on our diversity and our intentionality there, which I feel like we are being there, but it's just like the circles we're running in kind of aren't bringing that up. We just need to reach out a little bit further out of the comfort zone, maybe. Be willing to have those awkward conversations, as you said, but then also just developing that side of getting the financial resources to be able to provide a lot of that. It sounds like you said you had a pantry, so you have a pretty sizable office there.
We have two offices. We grew too fast. So we have an office in the northern neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and we have an office in the eastern neighborhood of Pittsburgh. And the northern office has our pantry and our legal services and a lot of our other adult centered services. And our east office is primarily for youth services and for training, because we have a large training room there and a private courtyard. And it's just really nice, big parking lot. So, but the goal is that we don't want to be in two places at once. We really, our big goal is to have a larger space that all of our services and resources are under the same roof, and with enough space that we're able to share with our friends, because we also, I didn't mention this, but we also support a lot of smaller LGBTQ orgs. So if they're trying to get their 501c3 status, if they're needing, they're like, okay, we're good on the programming aspect, but we need help on the financial aspect as far as like getting our taxes together. We're really helpful around there because we're not trying to do everything. We want to make sure though that our community is being served by our community.
Mhm.
That's very
With all of that and everything that you're able to provide to the age range and to the range of people and the needs, how often do you run into a situation where you're unable to help somebody or unable to help them in the way that you want to?
um pretty frequently, just because I want to be able to be there and do everything. And that's not feasible. That's just physically not possible. I think the thing that thwarts me most often is the housing piece, and that's just that Pittsburgh, like the rest of the nation, like there's not enough affordable housing, and it's just so devastating too. Because I also know this status of our shelters. I know that there's been an explosion in the rates of homelessness, both visually, like you can see a lot more people who are like living in tents and encampments and living in their cars, but also too with just the need. Like our pantry sprung up in response to COVID-19, but we keep it open and we've been expanding it because there's still a heavy need with inflation. What grocery stores are 40% inflation, so there's still a lot of need. But those are some of the areas where definitely housing, um, even more food, because again, it's just becoming very unaffordable at this point. But those are the areas I would love to grow in. But Yeah, I'm just very thankful to be doing what I really want to and set out to do in the first place.
That's amazing. I'm so grateful that you're able to find that. And, like I was saying before, that you're able to provide the things that you either weren't able to get yourself or didn't feel that you were valued enough to deserve those sorts of things. It's wonderful that you're able to do that. Coley, Alston, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing so much of your story. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.